We all categorize the world around us pretty much instantly, right? It's just something our brains do to handle all the information constantly coming at us.
Exactly. It's a survival mechanism, really.
But what happens like right after that split-second categorization, especially when we're talking about social groups?
Yeah.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into that whole loop, the often unconscious process of stereotype activation and then, well, stereotype application.
And our goal here is really to unpack the cognitive machinery behind it all. We're looking at the research you sent over to figure out what actually enables stereotype use.
Right.
And maybe more importantly, what someone who's motivated can actually do to put the brakes on that automatic process.
So for you listening, this is kind of a shortcut to understanding how your brain can make these judgments, sometimes without you even, consciously signing off on it.
Precisely.
Okay, but before we really get into the weeds, we need to nail down 4 key terms. They sound kind of similar, but they mean different things scientifically. Think of them as, like, steps on a path.
Good idea. The first one's pretty straightforward. Stereotype knowledge.
Okay.
This just means you're familiar with what a stereotype is. You know it exists out there in society. Doesn't mean you believe it, just that you know the content.
Got it. So step 1 is just knowing the stereotype exists. What's step 2?
Step 2 is stereotype endorsement. This is where you personally buy into it. You actually believe the stereotype is accurate. It's part of your belief system now.
Okay, so knowledge is knowing it, endorsement is believing it. Step 3.
Step 3, stereotype activation. This is the moment it gets triggered. The stereotype becomes accessible, ready to be used in your mind. It's switched on.
And that leads directly to the final step.
Usually, yeah. Step 4 is stereotype application. This is when you actually use that activated stereotype to judge someone who belongs to that group.
And the big takeaway from the study seems to be that this whole sequence category activation application, it's super fast.
Relentlessly fast. And automatic. Often totally unconscious.
And if a stereotype gets activated, unless you actively stop it, applying it is basically the default setting, especially for people we don't know well.
That's the core issue. That's why understanding the how is so critical.
All right, let's jump into section 1 then. Activation. How does a stereotype go from just sitting there dormant to being active? You mentioned 2 paths.
Yeah, 2 main paths that often happen kind of simultaneously and influence each other. The first one is automatic activation.
Automatic meaning no effort required.
Pretty much. It's triggered just by encountering stimuli associated with the group, seeing someone, hearing something. It follows that initial categorization we talked about.
Wow.
And it can even be triggered by subliminal cues, things you aren't even aware you saw.
That's kind of scary. What's the second path?
The second path is motivated activation. This one's less passive. It's driven by specific goals or needs you might have in a particular situation.
So one is stimulus-driven, the other is goal-driven, but they're both working at the same time.
Often, yes, they interact.
Okay, let's dig into the automatic side first. What makes that automatic activation more likely? The research mentions prototypicality. What's that about?
Prototypicality is basically how much a person matches the typical image or features associated with the group stereotype.
So, like, how much someone looks the part.
Exactly. If someone is highly prototypical, their features strongly match the stereotype, it speeds up that automatic activation. The brain just processes those typical features faster, more accurately.
Makes sense. And context matters too, right?
Hugely. The situation you see someone in totally influences which stereotype might get activated, if any.
So the same person acting, I don't know, aggressively versus acting kindly, different stereotype files might get pulled up by the brain.
Precisely. Context guides the interpretation. And of course, a person's own level of prejudice plays a big role.
How so?
Well, for people who already hold strong prejudices, the mental link between the group and the stereotype is just stronger and faster. It activates much more easily.
Whereas for low prejudice people, that link is weaker.
Or maybe even non-existent. So activation is just less likely to happen in the first place for them.
Okay, this brings us to something really fascinating from the research intersectional invisibility. What happens when someone belongs to more than one group that might have stereotypes attached?
Right. This is a key finding. It looks at people with intersecting identities, like, say, a Black woman or an Asian man.
Okay.
The research suggests these individuals are often seen as less prototypical of either of their identity groups. A Black woman might not be seen as fitting the prototype for Black person or the prototype for woman.
And that has consequences.
Yeah, it's a real double-edged sword. On one hand, if they aren't seen as prototypical, the relevant stereotypes might not get activated as strongly.
Oh, interesting. So maybe less stereotyping directed at them.
Potentially. Some studies suggest, for instance, Black women might face certain kinds of discrimination less often than Black men, maybe partly because of this reduced activation.
But what's the other edge of the sword?
The disadvantage is significant. If you're not clearly seen or categorized in these kind of standard ways, you risk being overlooked entirely.
Invisible.
Right. Your contributions might not be recognized. You might be passed over for leadership roles. You're not stereotyped negatively, maybe, but you're also not heard.
Wow. So avoiding the stereotype activation can paradoxically lead to a different kind of marginalization.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful insight.
It absolutely is. Okay, so shifting gears slightly to that second path, motivated activation. This is about why we might activate or even inhibit stereotypes based on our goals.
Right. The research points to three main types of goals here. The first one sounds pretty self-serving.
Yeah, that's a self-enhancement goal. It's basically the need to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, and stereotyping helps with that. How?
Well, one way to feel better about yourself is, unfortunately, to look down on other groups. Negatively stereotyping an outgroup can make your own group seem better by comparison, boosting your own self-esteem.
Okay, so putting others down makes me feel relatively better.
Got it.
What's the next goal?
The opposite, really, the comprehension goal. This is when your primary motivation is to form an accurate impression of someone.
Ah, so you actually want to know the person.
Exactly. If accuracy is your goal, you're much less likely to rely on broad generalizations or stereotypes. You'll actively seek out specific, individuating information about them.
And the third one feels really important for anyone listening who wants to, actively combat their own biases. The chronic egalitarian goal.
Yes, this is crucial. This is a long-term, deeply held desire to avoid being prejudiced. It might stem from personal values about equality or maybe concern about how others perceive you.
And if that goal is always kind of on,
If it's chronic, meaning it's a constant operating principle for you, it acts like a filter. It leads to less stereotype activation overall. That strong belief in equality actively interferes with the automatic trigger.
so that internal value system can be a powerful antidote. That's encouraging.
It really is.
Okay, quick note on timing. The sources say an activating stereotype usually fades within about 12 minutes.
Yeah, it has a relatively short half-life if it's not refreshed, but the catch is it can be reactivated really easily. So that 12 minutes isn't exactly a guarantee you're in the clear.
Right, not a free pass. Okay, so activation can happen automatically or based on goals almost instantly.
Yeah.
Let's move to section 2, application. This feels like the point where the judgment actually happens.
It is. And the research is pretty clear. Once a stereotype is active, applying it is the default unless the person is both motivated and able to stop it.
Motivated and able, both are needed.
Both. You need the will and you need the mental capacity at that moment.
So how do you fight applying it? What helps inhibition?
Well, the best way, especially if you have that comprehension goal we talked about,
Yeah.
is actively seeking out individuating information.
Meaning info specific to that person.
Exactly. Their personal history, their interests, their specific behaviors, qualifications, anything that treats them as an individual, not just a group member.
And people do this more when they know they'll be held accountable.
Yeah, accountability is a big motivator for accuracy. If you know you have to justify your judgment later, you're more likely to dig deeper than the stereotype.
Makes sense. What about personality? Does that play a role? Like some
Right.
people are just more likely to apply stereotypes than others.
Definitely. The research highlights a couple of cognitive styles. One is the need for cognition.
That sounds like people who enjoy thinking.
Pretty much, yeah. People high in need for cognition actually like effortful thinking,
Oh.
chewing on complex ideas, considering different angles. Because they value that mental work, they're less likely to just grab the easy answer, the stereotype.
Okay. And the flip side.
The flip side is the need for closure.
Yeah.
These are folks who really dislike uncertainty and ambiguity. They want quick, clear answers and a sense of structure.
So they'd rather have an answer, even a potentially wrong one, than stay uncertain.
Right. And stereotypes offer that quick, simple answer. So people high in need for closure are more prone to applying stereotypes just to, well, get closure.
Okay. This next part feels like the absolute core of it, the cognitive busyness paradox. This totally flipped my understanding because being mentally busy can apparently both help and hurt. Can we break this down slowly?
Absolutely. It's super important and, like you said, counterintuitive. The key is separating the activation stage from the application stage.
Okay, activation first.
Imagine your brain has limited processing power, right, like RAM on a computer. If you're cognitively busy, maybe you're trying to memorize a phone number while also listening to someone talk, that mental load actually disrupts the initial stereotype activation.
So being distracted actually stops the stereotype file from even opening properly because your brain is too busy with the other task.
That's what the evidence suggests,
Yep.
yeah. In studies, busy people who are exposed to stereotype cues, they complete fewer word fragments in a stereotypic way. The busyness interferes with the trigger.
Okay, so busyness can prevent activation, but what's the paradox?
A paradox comes after activation. If the stereotype is already active in your mind, then being cognitively busy makes you more likely to apply it. It facilitates application.
Wait, why? If you're busy.
Because inhibiting an active stereotype, consciously stopping yourself from using it, correcting yourself, that takes mental effort. It requires cognitive resources.
Ah, and if you're already busy with something else?
You don't have those resources available, your mental fuel tank is already running low from the other task, so the inhibition process fails.
Wow. Okay, let me try to summarize. Busyness can stop the stereotype file from loading. But if the file is already open, busyness stops you from closing it.
That's a great way to put it. Inhibition needs focus, and busyness drains that focus away.
That is critical. Okay, what about external factors like social power?
Power dynamics definitely play a role. The research generally shows that people in positions of power tend to stereotype more.
Why is that?
A couple of reasons suggested are they might feel more entitled to make quick judgments, or they might be motivated, maybe unconsciously, to maintain the status quo, the power difference, by seeing subordinates through a stereotypic lens.
But there's an exception, right?
Yes, and it's an important one. Powerful people are less likely to stereotype, or they'll actively inhibit it if their own rewards or success depend directly on the performance of the people they're judging.
Ah, so if their outcome is tied to being accurate about their team.
Exactly. Suddenly, the motivation for accuracy overrides the tendency to stereotype. Responsibility matters. Self-interest, in this case, promotes fairness.
Interesting. And self-esteem, how does feeling good or bad about yourself affect this?
It links back to that self-enhancement goal. When people feel secure and good about themselves, maybe they've just reflected on their core values, they tend to stereotype less.
Because they don't need to put others down to feel good.
Precisely. But conversely, if your self-esteem is threatened, maybe you just got negative feedback, especially the research notes from someone you might already stereotype as less competent, like a woman in some contexts, then stereotype application goes up.
It's like a defense mechanism.
An immediate, automatic way to try and restore that threatened self-worth by reaffirming a hierarchy where you feel you're on top.
It makes a scary amount of sense. Okay, let's shift to section 3, the consequences.
Hmm.
When these stereotypes are applied, what happens? We have to talk about the stereotype rebound effect first.
Yes, the white bear problem. This is about trying not to think about something.
Suppression.
Right. You actively try to push an unwanted thought, like a stereotype, out of your mind. And while you're actively doing it, it might seem to work.
But
the moment you relax that mental effort, the moment you stop actively suppressing, the thought often comes back even stronger than it was before. Stronger than if you'd never tried to suppress it at all.
why? Why does trying not to think about it make it bounce back harder?
There are a few theories. One is simple resource depletion. You just get tired of monitoring your thoughts. Another, more subtle idea is that the very act of monitoring for the unwanted thought kind of keeps it primed. You're constantly unconsciously scanning for signs of it, which ironically keeps it close at hand. You're looking for the thing you're trying to avoid.
So your brain's search for the forbidden thought function actually reinforces it.
Mm-hmm.
That's tricky. How can you avoid this rebound then?
Well, one slightly counterintuitive finding is that simply allowing yourself a brief moment to actually express or acknowledge the thought can prevent the pressure buildup, stopping the rebound.
Okay.
But the most effective prevention, going back to motivation, seems to be having those strong, chronic, egalitarian goals.
Because if you genuinely want to replace the stereotype,
Right. If your goal isn't just suppression, don't think this, but replacement, think this accurate thing instead,
Yeah.
you don't get the same rebound. The motivation to be fair and accurate is protective. Low prejudice individuals just don't show the same rebound effect.
Okay, so suppression alone is risky. Let's talk about the real-world impacts when application happens. Biased interpretation of behavior seems like a big one.
Huge. When a stereotype is active, ambiguous actions get interpreted through that lens. They're seen as confirming the stereotype.
Like the example in the research about a shove.
Exactly. The same ambiguous action, like a slight push, is perceived as more aggressive or violent if the person doing it is black compared to if they're white.
And facial expressions, too.
Yes, ambiguous expressions like surprise or maybe even confusion are more likely to be misread as anger on a black face than on a white face. The stereotype fills in the ambiguity.
And this leads us to maybe the most stark consequence, the shooter bias.
Yeah, this research is really sobering. It demonstrates the incredibly high stakes of this rapid, automatic activation and application process.
What does it show?
Consistently, studies find that participants are quicker and more likely to shoot an armed black suspect in simulations, and crucially, they're also more likely to mistakenly shoot an unarmed black suspect, misidentifying a harmless object like a phone as a weapon.
So, more likely to correctly identify a gun if the person is black, but also more likely to incorrectly think there's a gun if the person is black.
That's the devastating pattern. And it's not just limited to race.
No.
The bias also shows up in response to other cues associated with perceived threat, like people wearing Islamic headdresses, or even to certain types of clothing, or someone depicted in what's stereotyped as a dangerous neighborhood.
It's the association triggering the bias. Is there any way to mitigate this specific bias?
The research does offer some hope. Training and practice, like the kind police officers receive, can help improve accuracy in these high-speed decisions. Experience matters,
Right.
but the effectiveness of that training seems to be significantly boosted when it's combined with positive, real-world interactions with members of the groups in question. Practice plus positive contact seems key to actually changing that automatic impulse.
Okay. And the bias even extends to cultural things, like music.
Yeah, that was striking. The same violent lyrical content was rated as significantly more violent and offensive when participants were told it was rap music compared to when they were told it was country music.
Wow. The label itself changed the perception.
Exactly. And further studies showed that just hearing violent rap music could lead to more negative judgments of Black people generally. It even affected judgments in mock trials. Defendants believed to be rap artists got harsher judgments.
The stereotype just bleeds over onto everything associated with the group.
It seems so.
All right, let's move to our final section, section 4. Maintenance and change. How do these things stick around, and how can they actually be changed? First up, the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. This is where our expectations about someone, based on a stereotype, actually cause them to behave in ways that confirm our expectation.
So if I expect someone to be unfriendly because of their group, I might act colder towards them.
Which then causes them to respond less warmly to you, confirming your initial biased expectation. It's a feedback loop, and it works across all sorts of stereotypes, race, gender, even things like obesity.
It locks the stereotype in place through interaction. But what about when we meet someone who clearly breaks the stereotype? Why doesn't that automatically change our minds? This brings us to subtyping.
Ah, yes. Subtyping is basically the brain's way of handling exceptions without having to rewrite the main rule.
Explain that.
Okay, imagine you hold a stereotype about Group X being, say, not very intelligent. Then you meet someone from Group X who is absolutely brilliant.
An exception.
Exactly. Instead of thinking, maybe my stereotype about Group X is wrong, the brain tends to create a special little subcategory for this person. You think, okay, this person is one of the smart ones, but your general belief about Group X as a whole remains untouched.
So you fence off the exception, protecting the original stereotypes. You file them under anomaly.
Precisely. It's called concentrated disconfirmation when you encounter just one or a few stark exceptions. It doesn't usually change the overall belief.
So how do we change the actual belief, the main rule?
That requires what the researchers call dispersed disconfirmation. This is really, really important.
Dispersed meaning?
Spread out.
Yes. You need to encounter many examples that contradict the stereotype across different people in different contexts, not just one star exception.
So seeing lots of intelligent people from Group X in various situations.
Right. When the counter-evidence is widespread and frequent, the brain can no longer just create subtypes for all of them. It's forced to actually update the general stereotype itself. The exceptions become numerous enough to change the rule.
That requires a lot more exposure to counter-stereotypical examples than just meeting one person.
It absolutely does. It highlights the importance of diverse experiences.
The sources also briefly mentioned why people might hold stereotypes in the first place, using functional attitude theory. It's not always just about mental shortcuts. Right. Sometimes the stereotype serves a deeper psychological function. We already touched on the ego defensive function. Holding negative stereotypes about others makes you feel better about yourself or your own group.
Protecting the ego.
Exactly. And then there's the social adjustment function. This is about fitting in. People might adopt or express stereotypes simply because it's the norm within their social circle or community.
So conforming to the group's beliefs to be accepted.
It's about maintaining social harmony, even if it means endorsing a belief they don't personally hold that strongly. Peer pressure, essentially.
Okay, this all ties back to the listener's own experiences. The research talks about the 5 Ds of difference, typical reactions, when we encounter people or situations that make us feel different or uncomfortable.
Yeah, these are common responses. Distancing, avoiding, denial, pretending differences don't exist or matter, defensiveness, maybe getting guarded about appearing biased, devaluing, criticizing the difference.
Those all sound pretty negative or avoidant. What's the 5th D?
The 5th D is discovery. This is the positive alternative. It's about genuinely appreciating differences, seeing them as enriching, and being curious to learn more. It's the opposite of the ego defensive reaction.
Moving from threat to opportunity, essentially.
Beautifully put, yes.
Okay, so we've traced the whole loop, the lightning-fast activation, the conditions for application like cognitive busyness, the rebound effect from suppression, and finally, how hard it is to change these things without lots of dispersed counterexamples.
And that key role of motivation throughout, especially those chronic egalitarian goals, which seem to dampen activation right from the start.
Right. But for real, lasting change in the underlying belief, it seems like that dispersed disconfirmation is non-negotiable. You can't just rely on the one exception.
You really can't. You have to make the exception common enough that it forces a rewrite of the rule.
So here's the final thought for you, the listener. We know that chronic egalitarian goals reduce activation, and we know that real change requires dispersed disconfirmation. What steps, maybe focused on that intentional discovery rather than the other 4 Ds, what steps can you take to make those positive, counter-stereotypical examples dispersed enough in your own life?
How do you move beyond just creating an exception file in your mind and actually start changing the underlying rules? And maybe in your next interaction where you feel that slight discomfort of difference, take a second to check in. Are you operating from an ego defensive place, trying to protect yourself or feel superior?
Or are you genuinely aiming for that comprehension goal, seeking the unique information about the individual that leads to discovery?
Because assessing that internal motivation might be the first, most crucial step in interrupting the automatic process before it even takes hold.